Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Information Week Fast Chat titled Moving to the Cloud, but not without your network team. I am Bill Clayman, the contributing editor here at Information Week, and I'm also the EVP of Digital Solutions at Switch. Joining me today is Jim Williams, Senior Vice President of Marketing over at Blue Cat. And Jim, it's really great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
So I love this topic. I feel like I grew up on cloud computing, and one of the most favorite things that I do is I love helping people understand the balance between what needs to live on premise, what should be in the cloud, and beginning that conversation of, hey, Bill, I think it's time for us to move something into the cloud environment. But here is the kicker. It's something I've seen quite a bit as well. Dysfunction, right, between cloud and networking teams. I'm not kidding. It's still a hot button issue that I hear all the time. But what people don't really understand is the actual cost, the exact cost of the weakness of the partnership between these two teams. What do you think that looks like?
It's a great question. And you're right. The dysfunction between these teams continues apace. And if anything, it seems to be actually increasing. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of surprised to find out that, through some research we've done recently, that some 72% of enterprise organizations are failing to realize the full value of their cloud investments. And if you just think about the scale of investment that's happening with the cloud, that's a shocking number. Research that we've conducted shows that the sticking point is not technology. It's actually just operational issues, right? Actually collaboration between the cloud team, the developers, and the networking team, the people that manage critical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And there's some pretty striking costs to that dysfunction when we dug into the numbers.
Jay, I'm just excited to jump in here because honestly, at the high level, this sounds kind of bad. But what does this exactly imply for enterprises? Especially when it comes to their day to day.
That's the important question. Well, if you think about the last, I say decade, but really 5 years is just a pell-mell headlong rush to the cloud. Mm-hmm. That speed of moving to the cloud has created some real issues. And so when we dug into it, when we talk about security and compliance issues, we found examples where there's data theft, security breaches are some of the problems associated with lack of collaboration between these teams. Some of the IT operational issues, a big one was entirely failed deployments of applications in the cloud, moving the compute to the cloud. And some of the business issues really get down to poor customer experience, of course, when the customer fails to reach, again, customers being whoever is trying to reach mission critical business services, can't reach because, frankly, the application is built, but the plumbing hasn't been set up, so to speak. In some cases, even revenue loss has been attributed to some of these problems.
This doesn't sound great, and I'm sure there's a silver lining here. And when I had a chance to work with different kinds of cloud and virtualization teams, you know that communication is absolutely critical. So here's what I'm really curious about: why is this communication breakdown between cloud and network teams still happening? What are IT executives missing about the relationship between these two teams?
It's great. It's a great question. Some of it is just basic fundamentals, things that you kind of think of. You take for granted, like this is just how business operates, but shockingly, some 41% of the cloud adoption projects are not driven by executive leadership at all. They're happening from the ground up, kind of this democratization of application development that's happened with the cloud, and that causes real problems. The best examples that we got in the survey where people were satisfied and realizing a great return were clearly driven from IT executive leadership. So that's one problem that exacerbates it. The other problem, of course, is that in general, IT executives are somewhat sidelining the networking teams, right? Mm-hmm. There's this new kid on the block, the application developer, people working in the cloud architects, et cetera. Everyone's very excited about that. The promises of cloud are real. And as I said earlier, it's kind of, well, let's get the application migrated and ported into the cloud or build cloud native applications entirely. And then once that's all done, oh, wait, now we need to figure out how to actually build the connectivity to the applications, right? Make sure that people actually reach these applications. So that means that you got to have networking teams involved from the get-go. That's another major problem. And then finally, just related to networking involvement, there are just critical functions that are not thought about. Security, compliance, and specifically a topic that's near and dear to Blue Cat's heart is DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. There's no considerations being put into how to manage those and overcome the real complexities of kind of a hybrid architecture. And specifically, when it comes to mission critical things like DDI, as we call it.
So I'm taking some notes here, Jim, and you're bringing up some really good points here. Silos of operation, right? Complexity, fragmentation, this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? It's this disconnect that I've seen this still. So, you as boots on the ground and somebody who's seeing this, let's have the positive conversation here. I want to talk about how we can improve this and how we can actually make these partnerships and these teams better, right? So, Jim, I'm going to ask you a point blank question. Do you think that these relationships are fractured beyond a point where we can't fix it? And really, whose responsibility is it to fix this stuff? The team themselves, the leaders in the team, or the IT executive? Fill in the blank for me, Jim. What do you think?
It's a great question. No, of course, it's not fundamentally broken. I just think there's a little bit of a course correction, right? This happens in every wave of technology adoption, that the technology races ahead sometimes of the business process and the maturity of the organization. And I think we're seeing some of that catch up right now. Mm-hmm. The first one, obviously, to fixing this problem is it's got to be led from the top, right? IT executives, perhaps a CIO, but if not, IT executives need to lead the cloud migration strategy. It cannot just be a bottoms up thing. Or you end up with the Facebook adage, right? Move fast and break things. Well, they move fast and things are broken. So it's got to kind of come from the top. Today, I think we only had 34% of respondents saying that there was effective leadership around cloud adoption and moving to a hybrid cloud model. The other thing that's really clear is you need to have the networking team involved from the get-go in the design. There's real issues, critical issues that need to be considered and figured out right from the very start of a move of applications from on-premise, from data center to the cloud, and the network team needs to be involved from the start. The third is there's definitely some skills development that needs to happen on both sides, frankly. Networking teams, and we're very close to folks that are in networking, especially around critical infrastructure, complain bitterly that many of the hotshot application developers know very little about the basics of networking. And frankly, I think they probably would hear the same thing from the developer side. So there is some skills brushing up that needs to be done. Thankfully, there is massive number of opportunities, institutions springing up to try and bridge the gap when it comes to skills. So all of those are steps in the right direction, for sure. The final one, again, that's near and dear to our heart is right from the get-go, we got to think about making sure that there is a unified view across cloud and data center over the company's IP space and how they manage DNS connectivity. Today, that is a growing gap in many organizations. We have worked as a company and as an industry, worked for 10, 20 years to get to one view of the truth when it comes to DNS visibility and IP space management. And here comes the latest thing is cloud, which is again fracturing. So that needs to be paid attention to.
I love this conversation. And for everybody listening, whether you're in the application side or in the networking teams, be curious, never stop learning. If you're developing an application, ask questions about latency, ask questions about, hey, what is this thing running on, or how is it performing? And if you're on the networking team, learn about the application. How does it connect? What APIs is it pulling? Where is it pulling them from? You are going to gain a wealth of knowledge. It sounds, Jim, that if you follow some of these steps, that not all hope is lost. Is that accurate?
All hope is not lost. It's never lost. There's always a silver lining to that cloud project.
I love it. Now, you mentioned some really great statistics here. Where can we get this report, Jim?
It's a great question. You can find the report on Blue Cat's website. We are bluecatnetworks.com.
All right. Well, that's very cool. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us today. And for Information Week, I am Bill Clayman. Once again, you can download this report at bluecatnetworks.com. Thanks again, everybody.